Good morning, everyone, and good day for those who are in different parts of the country when you hear this. But I wanted to welcome you today to a special Chavender podcast. And usually, the person you see in front of you is Jenny Mitchell. But today, we're flipping the table around and we're moving things so that Jenny is actually the one getting interviewed. Now, you may want to know a little bit more about why this is happening, and I would just tell you that Jenny has been leading a group of women, 12 spectacular women who are leaders in North America, and they are putting together a collaborative book that is really talking about leadership and how we can grow and learn from others' experiences in leadership. And they're putting themselves out there. And Jenny is one of those people who is telling her story and really sharing for everybody to learn from. And I think it's a spectacular project. The women are amazing, and you're going to hear more about them over the next little bit as the podcasts come out. And but today I want to share with you Jenny and her story. So we're going to be interviewing her. My name's Schaefer. I am a coach with Jenny in Chavender. And if you haven't heard of Chavender before, I know Jenny always says Chavender, kind of like lavender, sounds that way. There's a great story about what Chavender means, but that is another podcast that you have to check into. You'll have to watch for that. So, Jenny, welcome to your show. How does it feel to be on the other side?
Oh my God, it's way scarier over here, Sherry.
Well, this is kind of fun for me because I don't get to be in this seat, so I feel like I got big shoes to fill. You're an amazing host of the podcast, and so I've got big shoes. But yeah, it feels different over there. Hey.
It does. It does. I'm looking forward to, we just, before the podcast, we pressed record, we were talking about the vulnerability of these stories. And I'm looking forward to sort of talking more about the process of writing it down and what I learned and what I'm still learning every day.
Yeah, and I think for you, it must be a great pleasure to see these 12 women coming together and really seeing your vision come to life of this collaborative book. So now the book is going to launch in the fall, right? The fall of
Yep.
2023. And so there'll be more about that. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. So, but for now, your piece of this, you're putting together your story. And so your story is one of the chapters, and, I read your story. It's really quite a touching story, actually. And I think there's a lot of people that will relate to this. And
Mhm.
I know I'm going to ask you a few questions. I know we're asking similar questions of each of the writers and authors. But I want to just say what really resonated with me was that this story could be anybody. It really could be anybody's story, because I think this what you talk about in this story kind of snuck up on you, and we'll dig into that a little bit, and how you realized it and what it meant. So let's start with the first question, Jenny. What did when you started this, when you started to sit down pen to paper, what did you at that time think your story was about, and then it actually turned out to be something slightly different? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So when I sat down to write the story, I thought it was a story about being right. I thought it was a story about how I had, the perfectionist in me had come up and that I was doing the right things, right? And upon writing this story and writing the process, it really became about loving the way I am, loving me, I called it that there is no specific way of being right in leadership. And the only thing you have to fall back on is your natural God-given strengths and who you are and what you believe and what your ethics are. And it was really funny to watch me fight that, Sherry, because I wanted it to be this lovely boxy story that about perfection and how it was supposed to be this way and this is how I led. And in the story, you hear me talk a lot about the books because I'm a reader and I'm a gobbler of information. And so I thought the answers were in the books, and they weren't. They were in me. So that's really the main message I want to impart from this story is you really don't know leadership until you're in it, in the messy middle, in the complexity of it. And the only thing you have is your knowledge of yourself and your self-worth. And of course, the co-conspirators and the colleagues along the way that help you navigate with that. I'm imagining this boat, Sherry, right? We're like all the boat and we're all navigating and we're looking for the skyline, and together it's messy, right? It's full of travels and travails, and there's lots of waves and lots of things that throw you off course. But you can trust yourself, or when you trust yourself, maybe that's it, eh? When you trust yourself, things go well.
Yeah, and I think you talk about in your story about the times when you kind of felt uncomfortable, and that you were kind of feeling fearful of those moments before you realized that it was really your style, right? But um, you were trying to um, configure into a style you had read about and had felt that it was
Yep.
it was the style you had to fit into, and really we're individuals, right? So tell me about that
Yeah.
fear, like that feeling before.
Yeah. And I think this is where I get on my soapbox and I say, as collaborative, compassionate, and ambitious women, we don't have a lot of role models. We have a lot of top down, a lot of masculine energy, a lot of stay in your lane, get the work done, well done, rewarding. And we don't have a lot of these. And I use the word vulnerable in the sense of not having to have all the answers figured out. Even if you look in my story, I talk about Hillary Clinton and Angela Merkel. So growing up, I'm in my 50s just. And those were the female role models we had. I mean, how boxy are they, right? Because they were electable because of the masculine energy they held and the masculine energy that they exuded. And that did not relate to me. And in my story, I talk about taking on the shoes of my former leaders. And each of them were all incredible men with incredible skills, with incredible achievements, but that was not me. They were not me. They didn't have the skills I had. And this idea that I could just plop myself into their shoes, act their way, or what I thought was the way to lead, and be successful it was so obvious afterwards, Sherry. But at the time, I'm an achiever. I tried really hard to fit that mold. And it was incredibly debilitating, is an understatement, but also really, really uncomfortable.
Mhm. Yeah, because it wasn't your natural style, right? And so you have to really relate to, we have to own and be authentic in what we're doing. And I
Yeah.
think your story really talks about being authentic. I
Yeah.
wanted to share something with you that I thought really might help, like, or relate to this story. Is when I was very young in my career, there was our CEO at the time, and she would come to our hospitals, and she would click down the hallway with her heels, right? Click, 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 and everybody would like spread out, right? Like, don't But she had a really, like, she always had a suit and skirt, and it was very stylish and formal, right? And
Yeah.
I think in my head, just like you, um, I had that impression that that's what you had to be, is you had to fit that mold. And what's very interesting is I've had a chance in my later years to meet up with her again since she's retired, and she said she was so nervous being the CEO. She felt just like what you described, is that
Yeah.
she felt she had to fit a mold, and what took her a while to find her own rhythm. So to me, I'm like, this person had it all together in my mind. She was exactly what you're supposed to be as the leader. And yet I find out later that she had her own fears and doubts. And,
Yeah.
isn't, and it was surprising to me. And I thought, wow, these are
Yeah.
real people, and they want to be authentic, just, very similar to what you're talking about. And I mean, I think
Yeah.
your story is very real.
Well, and I think the other part is we're so afraid of being judged, terrified of
Right.
being judged, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah. Is there a part of the story you'd like to read out for everyone? or piece that you'd
Yeah,
like
I
to
picked
share?
one. So we're gonna, yeah, that'd be great. So I'm just going to my screen here. So I want to set the scene. Let me just give you a quick high-level synopsis of what my story is about. Because I'm a coach and a consultant, I didn't have my own organization the way perhaps you did, Sherry, with your many, many years at your organization. So in a lot of ways, I think that this volunteer engagement that came into my life about 10 years ago was was a gift, that a place for me to explore, to grow, to challenge myself, and to really stretch my leadership skills. So I became 10 years ago, I joined the board of a tennis club where I'm a member. And during that process of over 10 years, I ran the fundraising committee. I became vice president. And the story is about the moment, or the time when I became the chair of the board. And from there, kind of what happens, and my whole process. The story talks a lot about these panic attacks that I was having just as I came into my leadership role, and this sort of contrast between my body and my brain and what was going on. And I tried, to your point, Sherry, very hard to fit a mold, to do it right, all those kinds of things. So the point in the story that I want to read to you is this moment where, according to the books, we were supposed to do a strategic planning session. But the challenge was that really, in a lot of ways, because of this governance change, we were like a 2-month-old organization that had been birthed for 100 years. And we were trying desperately and quickly to figure out what we were going to be. And basically the strategic planning session flopped. And this is where I pick up from here. When I came home from the strategic planning session, I told my husband all about it, because I always seek out sounding boards and he's the best one I know. I had to let go of doing leadership the right way. I had to start figuring out what Jenny's right way was, because the other way was literally sending me into panic attacks. One of the most powerful things to say out loud is, I feel like we're at a crossroads. Where do we go from here? That's how I wanted to lead. What the leadership books don't tell you is that you have to breathe life into your style of leadership. That the most important part of leading is, well, you. And liking you, liking how you lead, and being vulnerable enough to seek out feed forward from others is a fundamental ingredient. You have to trust yourself and give yourself permission to embrace your strengths and acknowledge your gaps, all while asking for help from others to fill the voids. As much as I was in charge, I couldn't do this alone, and my sounding board was my peers, my 8 peers around the board table. We were a team. Did my peers notice how I was grappling with leading? I remember working in a coffee shop in my neighborhood, and just by chance, my VP of the board came by and sat down to say hello. The first thing he said to me was, "You seem stressed. How are you?" I immediately teared up because, yes, he had noticed. Some people call it confidence. I prefer to think of it as reframing your relationship with self-doubt. The doubt is not going away, but over time and with experience, the voice of self-doubt becomes a little softer, a little bit less of a bully in your head. I have spoken to many women leaders about this experience. Whether it's social conditioning or how we grew up, many women struggle with speaking their own truth without that niggling self-doubt. My working theory is that everyone has it, but some people choose to acknowledge the voice and then make the decisions to step through the discomfort anyway. That's what confidence is, a deep level of knowing of yourself and your potential. Because, dear reader, no one is exactly like you.
Yeah, so powerful, really. And what a vulnerable moment for you, right? Like you're sharing something so deep and meaningful for you, and really opening up to people, and people that are going to read this that you don't even know.
I
So,
know.
I mean, yeah, right? I mean, and I shared with you earlier, there's a quote that I found that really, I think, speaks to your story, which is, growth and
Yeah.
comfort cannot coexist. It's the
I just wish they
uncomfortable that
would,
makes us
though.
push
Can we just
forward.
say
I
growth
know,
and
right?
comfort? Yeah, I just wish they could, but every time I've been faced with a growth opportunity, it's required me to stretch and to expand to meet it. And I think there are some people on the planet that are just compelled to keep trying things, and I am definitely one of those people. I don't do well in the status quo. I like to learn. I like to see others thrive. I like to be part of you talk about being a change maker. I think that's something I identify with too. Life's too short, Sherry. Like, I got things to do. I got places to see. Like, let's do it, but let's
Right?
do it together. I think that's what's different,
Yeah.
what's really different for me now.
Well, and I think the other piece that you talk about here that really is a strong component is that piece about working as a team and pulling in everybody's strengths
Yep.
to and utilizing our
Yep.
strengths to create a team together where we move forward, which is really sometimes people who are in leadership positions, they feel that they need to be all and do all, and
Yep.
in really when you can pull everybody together, you're stronger together, right?
And I still fall into that trap. Like, I'm just going to call a spade, and it'd be interesting because
Yeah.
Sherry and I work together. So I'm sure she could, but you're not going to. But I'm sure she could tell good
Yeah.
instances of examples of things where, I still struggle to let go of things. There's something very autobiographical about my business, about the work I do. This is a calling for me. That sounds really hokey, but
Yeah.
when you've learned something and you've experienced it, you really want others to have those supports that you didn't have. Or it's the worst thing in the world is watching your children and having this moment where you realize they're going to have to learn it on their own. Sherry, you can't spoon feed them, you can't bubble wrap them, and you can see it coming, and you just have to sort of just let go and be ready to pick them up or ready to support them in whatever they do. And that is life. That is life.
Yeah. And I think the idea of this book as a whole and your piece of it is to do exactly that, is that, the people that we support and that we guide, in the Chavender programs is really about giving them that some wisdom and guidance to help them so that when they do struggle, they don't feel alone. And I really think this book really speaks to that. The book writing is new for you too, right? You haven't written a book before, right? And I think that's the case with most of the women that are in part of this, is it's a new process for them. So was there a moment during the process of the writing when something clicked for you where it was like, an aha moment, so to speak, of writing, you know?
Well, it's funny because I held two hats during this. I held the hat of host, which was hosting these women, creating a space. That's a role I'm pretty comfortable with, facilitating. I love training and support. And I felt very good about the experience that I had created for these women. The other hat I held was author. And I was in total denial about that one, right? Like, I'll worry about everybody else before I worry about myself. Sound familiar to many of our listeners, I'm sure. And so, case in point, preparing for this interview, I did it this morning, Sherry, right? Took some time and to reflect. I can do it. But it's something I want to do more of as I get older, because I find that the learning that I have is really powerful when I take the time. So I'd say that the click moment for me in a lot of ways was my first call with Michelle, our editor, because at that point I had a story. I knew I could write. I knew I had a content, but it was kind of like pell mell, and it was a little bit of puzzle pieces. Where do they go? How do they fit? And she said something to me at the very beginning that was very poignant for me. She said, I don't think your story is about being right. And we go through these emotions. Like, the first one's like, I'm offended, not offended, but like, what do you mean, do you, right? And then you
Yeah.
listen, and you're like, yeah, there's another layer of nuance here that I hadn't realized when I wrote it. And once we framed it that way, with this idea of there's no right way to do leadership, which is very different than being right. And once you shifted it to there's no right way to do leadership, there's only your way and your style, and you've got to embrace that wholehearted. It was almost like whoosh, the floodgates opened up, because then my story had permission to land on the page. And it actually went quite quickly, Sherry, after that. I mean, I did change the beginning and I did change the ending, because something in the story is that, for those of you listening, is, beginnings matter because I want you to read the story. It's like, we want you to be hooked in. And Michelle would talk a lot about what are the table stakes. I love that expression. Like, why should we care as a reader about your story? And then at the end, this element of imparting knowledge or sharing or what's different now. It's funny. I've seen a couple of drafts of the other women's, and in some ways that's the part that's the hardest, because once you've shared, like, so what? Who gives a flying cahoot about this story? But at that ending part, once I had written the story, I took some space, because it's really hard to write and then edit. So I took some space and I went back with fresh eyes about a week and a half later and looked at it. And that was also another kind of, whoa, I actually did this, like, pinch me kind of thing. And then I was able to sort of write what it meant to me at the end. And I didn't want, the whole way through this process, I did not want another glib book about women's leadership, another coffee table book, another this is how you do it. And so I didn't know, I knew what I didn't want. But then when I read my story, I was like, this is what I'm looking for. And this is the kind of real time, real life, in the trenches leadership that I want to be a part of, and the kind of book that I want to be owning and sharing with the world. And I'm pretty proud of that. I can say that is something that I'm standing up on this podcast saying, I did this and we did this together.
Yeah, and I think what your takeaway, it sounds like, is the you did stretch. Even writing this, you stretched, and you can do it. And so for others, I mean, that's kind of the message in this book, is there's so many experiential learnings that people can take from this, so that they can grow and hone their leadership styles, right? I mean, would you say, are there other takeaways that you think that are part of that, or is that kind of the main one?
So I also wanted to comment about the sort of, well, I'm going to change your question, because that's what I'm going to do.
Okay. You go.
So am I sharing too much? So that was one of my questions, Sherry, that I kept coming back to. Am I sharing too much? Is this too raw? Is this whatever, right? And, when I was going, and I wanted to speak from my experiences, I can only imagine some of the experiences of other women leaders that don't look like me, don't sound like me, although all of our BIPOC leaders. I was told when I came into this role that the project I wanted to do at the tennis club, which was a restoration of a building, was a vanity project. This sort of attack of my leadership style in writing on LinkedIn, saying, well, this project is a total vanity project. What are you doing? Da, 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 da. You're destroying the club, et cetera, very publicly. Now, on the grand scheme of things, that's not a huge, I can live with that, right? But I want to speak to it because I want to talk about this kind of, I'm going to do it anyway. And for me, it wasn't at any bodily harm or any cost. But think of the women out there that are stepping into leadership, where I remember Michelle Obama talking about the most best thing about leaving the White House was that nobody was shot, nobody was kidnapped, right? Can you imagine having those kind of stakes on the table? So I kept going back to that, to my, to my little story, not to diminish the story or the book, but we need to normalize this. And that was also to your question, a takeaway was, we need to start talking about this, because when we talk about it, the stories don't own us, and we can be stronger and braver and more clear about what needs to change because of sharing these stories. Yeah.
Yeah, such a good, and I hope for others that they are able to take that and really feel like they are, they are part of the same thing, that they are, they're not alone in their journey of leadership, right? We're here. We've walked the same, very similar paths, maybe not exactly, but similar. And the challenges are, it's like I said to you, that I know someone who now is in their 70s who had a similar challenge, right? And
Yeah,
it just, I was like, wow, really, these things, we're together in this, really, and we can be supports for each other.
we sure can. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, this interview is about two things. One is about your incredible story, but also about your leadership in putting this collaboration book together, because you brought together women that don't know each other, people who are, met one day and the next day we're working together on writing a book. Literally one day, then the next day, and so this is a real demonstration of believing in a process and believing in a vision. And I want to ask you, how do you think the collaboration for you,
Mm.
how did it feel, and how did it shape you in this experience of collaborating with these incredible women that you brought together?
Oh, and it was so much fun. Oh my God. I have
Yeah.
such great memories of that weekend. I think we all do. Um, so I actually wanted to start writing a book for myself. And Sherry, it was on my to-do list for about 5 years until I finally said to myself, Jenny, you are never going to write this book on your own. When I kept thinking about it, it was a chore. It was in the to-do pile. It was in the, like how would I, because I really thrive on conversation and connection. You and I love our staff meetings, like
Mhm.
my ideas don't exist in a vacuum. And so I finally had to give up this idea that I was going to write this book and just say enough already. And then I had to ask myself, well, how would I like to write a book? And immediately I was like, well, I'd like to write it with women like me. I'd like to write it about the process. I'd like us to experience something together. And I don't mean like a lot of collaborative books are, here you go in your little room, send me a version of your draft of your chapter and we'll compile them all and yay, we have a book. That was not what this was. This was rooted in the research. So the original impetus or spark for the book, just for those of you listening, was being at a conference and hearing Dr. Megan Rabine speak about her research of the lived experience of women leaders at the CEO level. And the key learnings were into 6 pillars. And when she was describing them, I was like in the audience going, oh my God, this is me. This is my experience. And so you talked about that immediate connection. Because of that shared experience, we became very close very fast. We had 2 calls before the weekend and then we were absorbed. And I didn't know how this was going to go. And just going back to my story, it was like, this was the only way I knew how to do it. Like I had to trust the way I wanted to do it. And I had to trust that it would be enough if I could believe in it. And once I sort of committed to believing in it, the other weird thing was I knew all the 12 women, but they didn't know each other. So I was making all these kind of assumptions and things, right? Because I knew their backstories. And then I would watch these women I knew tell each other their stories. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is golden. So and then once we were getting together, I wanted to have an amazing hotel. I wanted to have amazing food. I wanted this to be something to remember, because I'm not into doing things halfway anymore, Sherry. I'm in this place in my life where when I commit, I'm in. And I think going into it, I think I thought of my, how do I put it? We talked about not feeling alone. That was, I saw that as a weakness in myself. This idea that I didn't want to be by myself, that this was sort of a weakness that I needed to address in leadership. And what I came out of the weekend was no, this is actually a superpower that I have, not other women have as well, but I actually think it's one of my special superpowers, this ability to trust in people. I'm generally a pretty trusting person until you wrong me, that we could all come together and that we could build it together, which is kind of wild and wacky and could have been scary for somebody else. But that was actually the most amazing process of being in the room, watching the other women talk and struggle and express themselves. And many of them have spoken about the word healing, that this was a very healing process.
Mm.
This idea of articulating your leadership, describing to others what you're about, what matters to you, was just as important, if not the fundamental secret sauce to getting this story on paper. And it's so much bigger than just the words on the page. So I actually think the collaborative, it couldn't have happened. There's no way this book would have been written we hadn't been together, and it wouldn't have the same impact if we hadn't chosen to collaborate to do it.
Yeah, it was such a natural, organic process in the sense, I mean, it was sort of like you brought us together and then trusted that the organic would just take over, and it really it did. And so I mean, I think for people who are going to read this book, because you want to read this book, I'm telling you these stories that you're just hearing Jenny's story today. You're going to hear just tidbits and teasers of everybody's story, so that you can you'll want to get it. That's all I'm going to tell you. These people are amazing. And when I walked away from that weekend, as Jenny said, you got to, you really were like, for me, I felt, excuse me, I felt like I was in this such a powerful room of, it's not about power, but it was about the strengths of people, their
Mm-hmm.
internal strengths. And it really does excite you and invigorate you to, to be all that, I know it sounds very cliche, but be all that you can be, and that's
Yeah.
the piece that I hope that people will get out of the book when they read it, because these women coming together, it really was such an amazing opportunity, and amazing a day. Really, the days together were they were short. We're talking 2.5 days, and people walked away feeling very connected, like you said, and
Yeah.
very excited about putting something out there that could help others, right? And so I think this is, I mean, with just kudos to you. I wanted to say that out loud. Kudos to
Oh,
you
thank
for
you.
having a vision like that. It really was amazing, and you really embraced that organic process and trusting in it. So yeah. Any last things you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Well, you've kind of put it nicely there. There was so much growth, and I wrote this down because I didn't want to shy away from saying it. I was right. I trusted my gut that this was the
Right.
right way for me, Sherry. Like, it wasn't necessarily the right way for some other executive coach or some other person that works with women, but this was the manifestation of my approach and my style. And I think that idea of friendship and community and connection are so ingrained in who I am and the way I do my work as a coach, that it was this sort of natural mapping of all of the things that I embody and that I've built Chavender to speak to, right? Community, conversation, and connection. That's what we talk about. And it's not that we dismiss the work of the book and the work of the best practice, but that is a component. And that idea of holding space for each other to learn and grow, and that this book gets to be that natural extension. I mean, goosebumps. Can't wait to have the dang book in my hand. Like, I don't know what I'll do. I'll either faint or like scream. I don't know. But it'll be a milestone, a capstone for the work I've done, but also I almost think like a trampoline or a platform for the work I'm going to do. The work we're going to do, Sherry.
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's very exciting for me too. I just, the potential that will come from this is amazing. And I think that we will see it as a transformational piece of work, that not only for Chavender and the work we do, but for others, the excitement of seeing others succeed in where they have had struggles and challenges, there's nothing like it. And this book is going to be transformational for people who read it and take it away. And I think that's a really big piece. I wanted to share a quote that I saw from Oprah Winfrey, who I think many people look up to. But the world's most prominent leaders show the importance of honesty, courage, impact, and decisive action in leadership. And this was a decisive moment for
Mm.
Jenny to put it out there for others to join her in being honest and courageous and wanting to have impact for others. And I just thought that that quote
Mm.
really talks about this project as such an important piece of work, and really hoping that it will help others. Jenny, do you have any last minute, like little tidbits, teasers for people about what the launch will be a little bit like, when it
Oh,
comes out, anything kind of fun to share?
yeah. So here's the power of community, right? This is no longer Jenny Mitchell's book. This is our book. And that means there are 13 voices, 13 different cities, 13 different events. We're looking at conferences. We're looking at hosted events. We're looking at book clubs, the idea that we read the book in concert with people and then we discuss it, because it's about the learning, the takeaway. Megan and I earlier just today on her edition of her podcast conversation, we were talking about learning circles, that maybe part of the launch has this opportunity to have reflection in a learning circle or a circle of women where we talk through things because we're changed from those experiences. So no, this will be just like the book, just like my approach to leadership, very different. This is not a cookie cutter launch. This will be very special. I have no qualms. There's no butterflies in my stomach, funnily enough, when I talk about this, because I know this. And we've also given ourselves a year. So this is not a flash in the pan kind of a book. My vision for the book is that it becomes part of required readings for some of the university learnings.
Yeah.
It becomes maybe part of those mid-level that you are so good at working with, those mid-level leadership development courses. It becomes readings from that. It kind of gains legs of its own and gets passed on from leader to leader as a book that might benefit someone who you're mentoring or whatnot. That would just, whew, that would like make my work is done. Like if we could do that, Sherry, for this launch and
Yeah.
start a conversation about this, that would make me very happy.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to be a must-read top 10. And for leaders and for women in leadership, I think this is going to be one of those things where people do have conversation about it. So thank you for bringing it forward to people. Thank you for bringing it to light. Thank you for, putting it out there as an idea and encouraging people to embrace it and be willing to share their vulnerable stories as you did. I think this is going to be an amazing journey, and we're bringing. It's not just the writers that are part of this, the authors. We're bringing everyone along for the ride, and you do not want to miss this. You want to get on this train because it's going to be an exciting time. So don't miss it. More to come. Jenny's going to be doing the rest of the interviews. Thank you for letting me step into your shoes for a day and be the host for your Chavender podcast for Underdog Leadership, and we want to share this. We really want to get this information out there for podcasts, so do share. If you're watching this and you like what you hear, share it with others, because the power of this is just like in the book. It's the sharing, and so share the podcast, share it with other people you know, and get other people connected and part of this, because those book clubs are going to be very big, and you don't want to not be part of them. So, and you can start your own and be part. We are happy to join you and be part of them. So this is going to be very exciting. Here we go. Thank you, Jenny, for a wonderful interview. And we will talk to everyone. Jenny will be the next host next time. And we'll talk to everyone another day. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.